I love coloring so much, but lately I wasn't having enough time for it. And even though I am a full time artist and content creator that gets to do artsy and creative things every single day, I was missing it. That's why last week I tried to finish my entire coloring book in just 24 hours. A challenge I failed miserably. I just did not like the rushing, it didn't feel authentic to me. So today I am back at trying to finish my book with a different approach. I honestly don't know how many pages we'll get through, but I know I'm going to enjoy it more and I'll be able to share some tips, ideas, and coloring techniques with you along the way. Let's get creative.
I want to start by showing you the markers I'm going to use today. This is the newest set by Ohuhu, and because I'm doing this part on voiceover, I can tell you already that I love them. I'm going to explain why as we move along, but if I were to choose only one set to get, this would be it. One of the things that makes me like it and that it's so unique to this set is this new chisel nib. Can you see how it's designed? It's so different. Thinner at the top and it's flexible, so that makes it great. Of course, I discovered this as I used the markers, but for now, let me show you how I feel one of the tiny rectangles of the swatch card. It's so nice to use because, like I said, it's flexible and you can rotate the nib for little details. These squares are tiny and outlined very thinly, so it's really hard to be precise while filling them, and this marker nib made it easier. With the color swatching done, I wanted to get back to finishing my book. I was going to do the next blank page available, but I really wanted to start trying this new technique I see everywhere, and the bunny page fits better. Because the trend involves having everything colored in grayscale with color used only on rainbow elements or highlights, I thought this bunny page would be a perfect fit. The day I was coloring, I didn't get reference to fill it. I wanted to see what I could do from memory. But here are a couple of pages in this style that I found later so you can see what I'm talking about. I started by coloring the background with a dark gray. And here I want to give you my greatest tip. When you have large areas to color, it is best to fill the space with tiny circles. And here's where these points shine because they are so flexible. They are perfect for this. They allow for amazing ink flow. This is why either side is also good for blending. I'm starting simple because I was excited to try this trend. No worries, I'll show you more techniques as we move along the video. After that dark background was done, I thought it best to mark the highlights before coloring anything else with gray, because it's obviously harder to go lighter on top of dark. My main light source will be the moon, so using a yellow marker, I drew a parallel line to every outline that I thought would get hit by the moon's light. I think I made some mistakes in drawing those, but you get the idea. Also, now that I'm done, don't worry that much about it. It ends up working even if you have some mistakes. I drew lines around the stars and the hearts as well because I thought those were gonna be luminescent too. Now we can move forward, and I chose to start with the bunny. I grabbed a gray that I thought was light enough, but immediately after putting it down, I regretted it. It looked dark, but that was okay because I found a lighter gray and I decided I would just blend the two together. And even though it took me a little while to find the second marker and uncap it and use it, you're going to see I still got a really nice blend because of how well these markers work. There. I was happy with that, so I continued using them for the rest of the bunny, blending one on top of the other, using the darker shade on the areas where shadows would be, so the furthest from the moon. Then I wanted to experiment a little bit and added shadows with a purple marker. I chose other shades of gray for the remaining clouds. These, of course, I wanted to be lighter than the background. I also blended the gray of the clouds into that yellow outline I had given the stars. It was not a great blend, but I knew I would get to this and improve it later. With all of the gray done, I colored the moon. I started with that same super light yellow that I used for the highlights, and then I blended in a darker yellow in the center. I wanted to make it like the edges shined more. This blend was also easy to make with the new chisel. I like how it allows for like a more artistic stroke. It's hard to explain until you use them, but it feels so right. Because of this, I think these markers would also be amazing for illustrating and not only for coloring. I followed the same coloring process I did for the moon on the stars and the heart, making the centers darker and the edges lighter, using purples and pinks for them. Now all I had to do were the rainbow bits. The first try was a flop because I added all of the colors and then I tried to blend them with the light yellow. That looked bad. I gave it a second shot and this time I didn't blend the markers with one on top. I used them one by one, blending them into each other. I just kept them all uncapped on the side so I could use them quickly. I let the color blocking be super apparent and that seemed to work better. But it was still looking a bit weird to me, if I'm honest. I just decided to trust the process because this is something I've never tried before. So I just carried on to see if it would work at the end. And remember how I said I thought I made some mistakes with how I placed the highlights at the beginning? Well, now that I'm editing, I'm thinking that large area was actually working. I don't know. Regardless, I went back over the ear and made it thinner. So now the page was completely full, and maybe my result is looking a little different, but it's time for highlights and details to take it to the next level. With everything fully dried, I added a few shadows where needed and then grabbed acrylic markers to create highlights. Ohuhu kindly sent these markers too. They are actually my second set of these markers, and this I loved from the first use because they are direct ink, which means you don't have to activate it. You just give them a little shake, uncap them, and they're ready to use and they're very opaque. I started with the lighter yellow by adding little dots to the edge, covering a lot of the black outline, but also going beyond it. Left that alone for a second to dry, and then I used purple and pink markers to cover the black outlines of the stars and circles. As those dried, I went back to the moon and layered white dots on top of the yellow ones. I was going for a glittery edge. Using the same white marker, I drew lines on top of the black outlines that were next to the rainbow bits. I started to really like this page at this point. The white line made the colorful highlights make sense. Now the moon wasn't looking shiny enough for me, so I decided I would make it more glittery. For this, I grabbed darker shades of yellow. I have a detailed tutorial on how to color glitter on this video, but for now, let me explain that what you need is to cluster the darkest dots on the side where you would naturally have a shadow, and have the dots become smaller and spread apart as they reach an area that would have a highlight. So once I had all of the dark colors down, I let those dry, and in the meantime I went back up to the stars and used the white marker to create a white line between the edge of the coloring and the black outline I had covered before. I also used the white marker to add a little bit more of dots to look like stars. Finally, back to the moon to add more light yellow and white dots on top, and added a few tiny starbursts to take the glitter effect to the next level, and that's it. Here's the first page, and I'm happy I tried this trend. I really like the result. It's not that hard and it's pretty. Now I'm going to go back to that first page with the chair. I had so many ideas and trends I wanted to try on this one, but I settled on having this magical, mysterious fog coming out from the magazine, immersing the girl completely in its world. To get this effect, I needed to overlay color, so that means I need to color everything on the page first. When a page has a lot of little elements like this one, it can be hard to choose colors, so I make it easier for myself and I go for an analog color palette, which simply means I only use colors that are next to each other on the color wheel and use different shades from those colors. This makes the page look better because any color you choose for any element will look great and harmonious on your spread. So with that in mind, I chose warm colors for this one, peaches and pinks. I'm once again coloring the largest area first, and you can see doing the little circles with this flexible nail. Little circles is the way to go because you don't really need to be that fast to get an even result. Right there, I took a mini break to answer my cell phone, and it looked like the color was going to leave a mark where I stopped and started. But because of the circles, the paper is really saturated with alcohol and color, so once it dries, it was perfectly even. You can see it in the back while I'll color the shorts, how even the chair rest looks. Kept coloring in the page with all of the pinks and variations of light orange and bits of brown and burgundy, which are super dark shades of orange and pink. I could have colored the plant with an orange or yellow ochre or even brown, but I felt that coloring it with green and adding that punch of color was going to be a nice contrast for the page. And I tied that in by coloring one of the books with the same green. I also chose a color that is basically yellow for the cat just to draw a little more attention to it. Like always, I kept every single marker I used out next to me on the table, and when I push them all together, we can see that without truly planning it, I have a beautiful color palette once I arrange the markers in rainbow order. Okay, so everything was now colored and it was time to figure out how big this portal or the world the magazine opened would be. So with a ruler and a pencil, I drew lines coming out from it so I could determine what would be in the scope of the magazine's magic. Lines were ready, and I noticed I still had to add details to the page first. So I created polka dots on the girl's t-shirt. It's not looking very great, but it adds texture, and that always works. And then I started to add shadows around the page because by now all of the colors were dry enough that I could do this and use my same marker on top and get a darker color with crisp edges. Adding shadows to a color page has to be one of my favorite things because it's just such an easy way to elevate your coloring. It's very little effort. Even if you mess up and the shadow is not exactly where it should be, it's going to look pretty much okay. Honestly, you could color the entire page, add shadows, and be done with it, and you'll have a great result. Or you could just go in and add a lot of texture, or you could just color flat. Whatever you want to do is great. This is what I love about coloring. It gives you so much flexibility. You can invest on it any amount of time you like, and you'll get the same amazing emotional results. This is also why I made my books so simple. There are some pages that you can literally fill in 5 minutes and still get all of the benefits from coloring and connect to your joy. Or you could take the same simple pages and make them yours by trying all of the techniques and fun stuff. Or you could go for a slightly more complicated page that needs more textures and try that. My thinking with that is that our needs and wants vary from day to day. Sometimes you want to do something simple, sometimes you want to take a long time with it, sometimes you want to experiment and try something new. We are not constant, and that is okay. So I wanted something you could color on your different moods and seasons because sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't, right? As I added my shadows, I noticed I forgot to give attention to the rock, so I colored an additional circle in the middle of it. As that dried, it was time to create the magical effect, so I grabbed the light purple marker and I started using the chisel side to draw these lines coming out from the magazine like a starburst. At first, I just stopped in the middle of the white space, but then I did not like this at all, so I continued the lines all the way to the edge of the paper. Because of the flexible chisel point, I think even though I let those first strokes dry, what I did on top to extend them, it still looks good. And of course, I would polish it further with acrylic markers later. I first used purple and white on the edges of this magic cone, and I smudged the color with my finger so the lines would not be as harsh. Then I added more white highlights in the form of stripes on top of everything to add movement to it. I started adding a lot of dots again. Tiny, colorful dots are my go-to for when I have to add a little magic to a drawing. I started with purple dots that I clustered closest to the magazine, and I slowly spread them out as they moved away from it, extending the magic. Then a little bit of light pink dots, and finally, of course, the white ones that make the most difference. And to add to this, I also use a white marker for larger circles to draw tiny starbursts and to add highlights to everything on the page. I was about to do the highlights for the plant when I decided I would paint some pink and yellow stripes on it because now I am painting stripes on plants. It's my thing now. I like matching plants I draw to the one I have in my studio, which is a plastic plant that I painted on. And with that little detail, this page is finished. I really like the effect, and I don't think it was a very complicated one, an easy thing to do. And now it makes sense that the cat is so mesmerized watching its owner read. Moving to the next blank page, I can see I stained it a little bit when I colored the gray bunny, but that's okay, we'll fix it. I'm starting with getting a base color on everything because this is the page where we add all of the textures. So the windows with brown to make them look like wood later, and the ledge where the bear is sitting, I'm going to make it look like stone. For this, I grabbed 3 different shades of light grays, warm and cold, and I draw irregular shapes in the space. It doesn't matter what shapes as long as they are a little angular and they fit into each other. Then the bear I painted brown too because I wanted it to be a classic teddy bear. And for the stone arc, I used the same colors that I use on the ledge. And because I want to do a brick wall, I start drawing parallel horizontal lines across the page with a pencil and a ruler. I am not measuring, but I'm just eyeballing a simple brick pattern. It's just for reference. You could do this with one marker, but I decided to get 3 different colors I liked most for brick and use all 3 by drawing rectangles with each one within the guidelines I drew. I'm not going to fill the page entirely, I just have the grid for reference, and I'm going to choose which rectangles I color to have a nice composition. Then of course colored the leaves too, but I added some of that burnt yellow to the side so they would be brighter. For the inside of the room, I chose a dark gray, which I blended, making it darker towards the bottom. Red for the heart, and to tie that color in, I used it for the little dots as well. The bird, I wanted it to be greenish gray, but it looked a little bit dark. Regardless, I left it there, and I took a lunch break, letting everything dry a lot before coming back to it. When I came back, the bird was a little lighter, but I still thought it was too gray, so I colored on top of it with the lightest green of the set. I erased the pencil guidelines and I started to add details to the bricks, drawing a shadow on the left bottom side on each and some dots for texture using of course the same color I colored each rectangle with. With all the bricks done, it was time to add the wall, so I colored a bit of it with warm gray, adding a shadow on the right side of each brick and stippling around them to create the wall texture and have it fade out to the sides of the page. I wanted the dimension of the bricks to be a little more apparent, so using the same light gray, I retraced about half of the shadow I created at the beginning. It's finally time to do the wood grain, and I know a lot of people struggle with this, but you're gonna see it can be really easy to make an area of your page look like wood. What you do is you draw a little oval somewhere on the brown space. Then you just surround it with very organic lines, like an eye, and you slowly start to make these lines straighter and straighter, but of course you never make a line that's truly straight because this is an organic element. Then you can add more lines and curve them gradually or draw another elongated oval somewhere and surround that one with lines. I'm drawing all of these lines with the same marker I colored the entire area. Done with that first layer of lines, so I grab a much darker brown and I'm gonna do more lines on top and a little offset of the ones that I already have. I need these new lines to be thinner, so I'm using the chisel side of the marker and turning it on its side to get that super fine point. And this allows for very fine, precise lines. Loving this new chisel. And if you make mistakes with drawing the lines, it's okay. You won't be able to notice because it adds to the texture. I have another tutorial on how to do coloring textures that you can check out. I'll link it in the description because you can get a free coloring page with that one and you can print it as many times as you like to practice. I'm going to leave adding subtle highlights to the wood grain for last, and now I'm going to go ahead and work a little bit more on the stone ledge by coloring the spaces in between with a dark green. I'm using a little bit of green because moss often grows in between rocks, and then I color the rest with dark brown, giving them a little bit of a shadow. Then, with the same color I drew each stone, I create these random angular shapes on top of them. And to support the irregular shapes, I grab a black marker and I make the straight outline more irregular by going out of it. Again, leaving the highlights for last, so now I'm going to do the teddy bear. I want him to look fuzzy. I draw a patch on his head and some stitching all across him to turn him into a plush. I'm still using the same color of the background for everything. Next step is I draw a thin line where shadows would be and start having dots coming out from that line. Cluster to the line at first and then thinning them out as they go to the places where the lightest parts of the bear would be. When I was done doing dots with the base color, I grabbed the darker brown and I did more tiny dots very close to the black outline of the bear, and then I spread those out, but not as much as with my light brown though. I just kept adding and adding until I got more of this fuzzy texture. And remember, this is working because the base layer, the base color of the bear was completely dry. This is all going to really come together and make more sense once we add the finishing details. Back to the rocks, which are now dry, and I use the same color on each again, but this time I draw very thin lines on top of the irregular shapes using that chisel. I want the fragmented rock texture. At this point, I realized I forgot to do shadows on the stones of the arc, so I just add those in. Again, not following the outline exactly, but with angular, irregular shapes. I'm done with the marker, so it's time to finish everything with acrylic markers. I start by using the white one to create highlights on the stone, and then I use a light brown to make the bear look fuzzier by breaking that solid black outline by adding little dots on top of it. I couldn't match the brown exactly, so it doesn't really look great on the dark parts. Yep. I filled up its patch with white and added white little dots for highlights. Then I went back to adding highlights on everything, stones, leaves, and very small ones on the bricks. I used a brown colored pencil to go over the parts of the acrylic brown marker that were too light and polish the stitching a bit too. Using a white color pencil, I created soft highlights on the wood, and I also used an alcohol marker to create a bit of a shadow in the inside. And to finish, I used a fine point marker to draw some stitching around the patch I gave the bear. And that's it! Oh, I'm so obsessed with this page. Turned out super cute, and the back is just magical. I did stain the next page, but it's okay, we'll fix it again. I need to remember holding the cardboard to the book with a clip. I always forget. I really want this page to communicate all the circles on the heart are light bulbs, and I want the heart to be pink, but I need other colors to get that glowy effect. So I picked the lightest yellow, light peach, and soft pink. I uncapped all three markers and kept them all in my hand because there's going to be a lot of blending for me to achieve this look. I started working around the circles by drawing around them with the light yellow, and then I rapidly blend around that with the light peach, going back and forth between the two, and finally I add the pink next to the peach. Let's do that again. I go around the circles, then I go around that yellow with the peach and blend it with the yellow and then use the pink. And as you can see, I move back and forth between the three markers a lot just to get the effect I need. And you can also see here the coloring in circle techniques is so useful. I get an even result even though I'm using three colors to fill an area. It looks weird when it's still wet, but trust me, it's gonna work and look nice. So the heart is done, and I decided I would mark all of the areas that would be highlighted on the characters because of the light bulbs. Just like I did on the first page, I did this with a yellow marker. Next was the background. I really needed to color the background to cover the brown stains. I wanted the light bulbs to project some light onto the background too, so same technique, which meant I needed 3 shades of purple, light, medium, and dark. My idea was to color a half circle with the light purple next to the outline of the heart, corresponding to where each light bulb was, and then blend that into my medium purple to give the effect of light reflecting on the wall. And my best tip for this is to keep all 3 markers loosely capped in your other hand. It really helps to be able to switch between them easily. Keep in mind that to blend 2 colors, you have to go over each with the opposite color more than one time. It's a lot of switching back and forth till you get the desired effect. I also blended the medium shade into the dark purple towards the bottom because I needed to cover the stains, and also the ground was the furthest from the light source, so it made sense. As I continue coloring around the heart, you can get a better look on how I drew these half circles and then blended them out into the background. Moving on, I chose a burgundy for the cushion. With pinks and purples already on the page, it was an easy fit. Again, colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, I'm just changing the shades and values. Then I colored in every light bulb with a strong yellow and went neutral for both the dog and the cat. I don't think too much about the color from here on, I just enjoyed filling up spaces. I was happy with how the light effect looked, but to push it a little more, I grabbed my acrylic markers and went over the outline of every circle with a light yellow. As the acrylic paint dried, I went back to the alcohol markers to add shadows on everything since the page was dry enough now. Like I said, I love this step. It's easy, you don't need any other materials, and it always looks great. Just draw a line close to the outline on only one side of the illustration. Finally, I used the white marker for highlights, paying special attention to each light bulb. I also drew highlights on the other elements of the drawing, and I noticed I forgot to add a shadow to the ground so that the cushion wouldn't be floating in space. And that's it, page done. Last of the day, and I colored 4 in about the same time in which last week I colored 12. But guess what? I enjoyed these a little bit more. I still have about 8 pages to finish my book, and I'm happy with that. I enjoyed coloring these so much. I enjoyed taking my time with them, and I hope that you found the tips I shared useful and that you liked hanging with me today. I needed this time for myself to color because coloring relaxes me a lot. Thanks again to Ohuhu. I simply love this set. I have a large 120 marker set that I didn't even miss because the color selection is so great on this 60 marker pack. And like I said, both flexible nibs are amazing for coloring and different types of strokes. I truly recommend them. I will link them in the description with a discount code that Ohuhu gave us for anything on their website. And yeah, that's it for me today. I hope you have the most wonderful day. Bye.